Germany is like the no man's sky of foreign policy. They just promised so much and none of it was delivered. It's insane.
Oh yeah.
No Man's Sky delivered
Eventually, they eventually
I will
delivered. Maybe
actually
2
dig
years from now, the Germans will actually deliver something. But right now, they've delivered nothing.
2 years from now, we'll get the 500 combat helmets they promised.
This is just completely dropping that narrative and saying, look, this is our land. We're gonna take it. It's ours. This is the Mountain Turks arc. This is that these aren't Kurds. These are Mountain Turks. This is our land. This is Russian land. We're taking back what's ours. I'm Peter the Great. I'm a historical conqueror. I'm writing my name into history. We're gonna take what's ours. If this was about NATO expansion, then this would just be about, well, this has nothing to do with taking back Russian historical territory. No, he's completely saying, no, this is ours. We're just gonna take this.
Which is actually one of my disappointments I had with American streamers, especially Kyle Kalinske is in this category. Hassan, Abi, absolutely. I mean, they just don't know a lot, but they are extremely confident about their worldview. Even though they know desperately little about Europe.
I would like to welcome everybody to the Ukraine Report. This is when me and my co-host AdamSomething either bring on a guest or not a guest whatsoever. We might do that in the future. Just talk about the news in Ukraine, talk about topics surrounding Ukraine, or talk about what I've seen on the ground in Ukraine. And today we've brought on actually a local reporter from Ukraine who I will now allow to introduce themselves.
Everyone, I'm Romeo Kokriatski. I'm the managing editor of the New Voice of Ukraine and the co-host of the podcast Ukraine Without Hype. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms. I've been a journalist here for the past, 6 years. I'm half Ukrainian. I live in Kiev. Not at the moment, but generally, yeah, I live in Kiev. And my life is pretty much just covering the war. So I feel like I'm pretty topical for your episode today.
Not just that, not just that, and don't lie to me. He actually, I'm suspecting, is a Russian agent, and this is my argument. Okay, is when you were over at my house, you showed me the worst music I ever listened to in my life, and I think it was a form of psychological warfare planted by the Russian government. You snake, I know it. What was their name?
It was millennial warfare. So as a millennial, I'm always very curious to know what the youths think. Dylan, being a youth, I felt missed some of the greatest heights of American culture in the I think early 2000s. And there's a band called Broken Side. If any of your listeners are over the age of 25, they may have some experience of this period of American culture.
It was absolutely horrible. It was so bad.
I am about 25. I do not have any experience. Sounds like for the better. Yeah, sounds like for the better. So.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely for the better.
Absolutely for the better. Adam, who are you? I don't remember who you are. Explain.
Yeah, I'm Adam. Hi, I make YouTube videos, and yeah, I'm AdamSomething on YouTube. You can go find me. You can watch my videos about things, mostly Elon Musk, trains, urban planning, and nowadays Ukraine. And now I'm here because I also want to cover the Ukraine situation in a podcast format.
Absolutely fantastic. I also want to say the reason I'm holding my mic today is because my mic stand is in the Donbass, and so it's going to take a while for me to get it back, okay? So I'm going to have to wait a little bit. I left it in the car while some buddies of mine had to go out there to do some stuff. And so I apologize to all my listeners for some crappy audio today. But we were just talking about, before we officially started the show, about these conspiracy theories. And somebody brought up the chemical weapons labs. And I wanted to talk about that for a second because the idea was that these chemical weapons labs were developing, and this was something said by the Russian government and repeated to both me and Adam in debate form too, when we were debating our two of our most favorite fellows, Adam, which you debated recently again. And it was repeated to us, this idea that these chemical weapons facilities were making weapons with the assistance of the United States, most likely, to target Russian DNA. And the thing that gets me about this is it's impossible. Number one, that's insane. I don't understand how you even do that technology. I'm not a bioweapons expert. I'm not that type of a weapon smuggler. But what gets me about it is I've been out east finally, like a deep out east, and finally getting back. All the people I met, they speak Russian. They have many of them mixed Russian Ukrainian families. They have deep ties to Russia. The idea that you could build this bioweapon that would just eliminate the Russian population that is loyal to the Russian government and somehow survive and like be able to keep Ukraine as some like united whole is insane. I mean, when you think of like the most demonized groups, or the groups that like get the like are known as like these are the anti-Russian groups, you know what I mean? You're talking Azov, you're talking Right Sector. When I ran into these boys, they all spoke Russian. I didn't hear a lick of Ukrainian from any of them. And so you're telling me they're developing a bioweapon that's going to eliminate them as well when they're also the people like pulling the string? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's what gets me.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't understand.
No, Dylan, it's actually.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, no, it's actually just it's all the Benderite Azov propaganda that like shifted their genes, because it permeates Ukraine so hard. Plus they must have like George Soros must have sent some like substance which they then tossed into the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, which then spread some exotic Jewish heavy metals across Ukraine, which morphed their genes, and now the Ukrainians can be, even the Russian Ukrainians can be Nazis, and their bioweapons, the anti-Russian bioweapons will not harm them.
You've put more thought into this than Russian propagandists. Like, it contradicts Russian propaganda itself, because one of the core kind of theses of the invasion is that from the Russian perspective, Ukrainians aren't real. We're basically Russians who speak what they derogatorily refer to as village Russian. Ukrainian is a separate language. It is not Russian, nor is it a dialect of Russian. But that's how the Russians see things, that we speak. We're Russian.
Reminds me of the mountain Turks with the Kurds in Turkey. Reminds me just of that. How they're not Kurds, they're mountain Turks.
It's kind of similar. We're basically Russians who have lost our way. And one of the reasons that the initial stage of the invasion, when they like went into Kiev, they were landing like paratroopers on an airport they did not control, and everyone just kept dying. And the reason they did that was because probably Putin himself legitimately thought that if they could just get rid of the Nazis in government, all the rest of Ukraine will magically remember that, oh man, we're actually Russians. Let's get rid of all this Ukrainian crap. We've been Russians this whole time. This is what the Russian government legitimately believed that, and planned their military invasion around that belief. So the whole bioweapon story, also they were claiming we were developing nukes, which is hilarious, but this whole bioweapons claim doesn't even gel with that, because in that case they're saying the Ukrainians were developing bioweapons to kill ourselves.
Well, the latest line from Russia was that Ukraine needs to be freed from its, among other things, Jewish colonizers. So, I mean, what can you do? Like, fascism is incoherent as always.
The thing that gets me about the Russian bioweapon line is the idea is that they're developing that, number one, that the Ukrainian government was committing a genocide in the Donbass, even though the UN Secretary General says that's nonsense. Russia has not made a proper case for this whatsoever. There's no evidence of this occurring. This is complete nonsense.
It's made up.
Yeah, it's completely made up. Even though the New Line just produced an amazing report that actually makes a decent argument that Russia has engaged in behavior that could easily ramp up into a genocide. Yeah. I don't know. I would suggest to everybody listening to go read the report. It's very compelling. Even if you don't agree with the conclusion, which I could understand maybe if you didn't, it still lists off a ton of war crimes committed by the Russian government that are completely indisputable and should be made note of. But I want to talk about this for a second, because the idea that these weapons would be produced, number one, the people killing the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine is the Russian government. They're the ones that are being killed by the bombardment. They're the ones getting killed by artillery, missiles, the use of thermobaric weapons, getting executed, etc., getting arrested and sent or forcefully deported, which I think is one of the best cases for genocide in Ukraine. They're the population they're the government, that they're the ones doing this damage to the Russian-speaking population. They're the vast majority of the refugees are Russian-speaking population, produced from the Russian invasion. But if the Ukrainian government just wanted to kill all of the Russian-speaking population, they would just let the Russian government come in and start and do what they're doing right now, because they're the ones killing all the Russian speakers in Ukraine. But the thing that gets it for me is Azov, right sector. And the vast majority of soldiers I saw out there fighting them, you could think of the most anti-Russian government forces in Ukraine. Most of them are from the East that I've met. Many of them are from the East. When I was in Zaporozhye speaking with these soldiers, I would hear da. I wouldn't hear tak, right? I would hear niet, not no in Ukrainian, which I believe is nia. I'm learning nia. I'm learning slowly. Ni, yeah. And the reason why is because these are the Russian speakers the Russian government are like claiming they're trying to save, but they're the ones fighting them back. And so when I hear the story of these chemical weapons, if they were developed to eliminate all the Russian-speaking populations or those with Russian DNA, it doesn't make any sense because they're a large section of the population that's fighting back against the Russian government. It is the Russian speakers that the Russian government is framing as being victimized by the Ukrainian government that is most fiercely fighting against the Russian government because the Russian government is the one destroying their homes, killing their people, etc.
It sounds like an agent of George Soros to me. Dylan, you're with the Jews against Russia, and you're a Russophobe. Just admit it, dude. And thank you, still this.
Oy vey.
The one I remember I did an interview with the Red Cross here in Ukraine, and one of the questions I got from one of the staff members is, "Oh, you're working for that Soros publication?" And I was like, "That's a weird thing to ask of a journalist." That's
Damn right.
Oy, yeah, that like the answer was yes. We get funding from the whatever his foundation is.
God, I want Soros money. Do you know how much I want Soros money?
I legitimately, for a portion of my career, I was legitimately paid with Soros money. It's true.
George Soros, I am making a request right now. Please fund this podcast. I will put whatever ads in here you want. I will advocate for a one world government. Please fund this podcast. I will get an Illuminati tattoo on my neck like Cody Rhodes got the wrestling tattoo, okay? I'll get it, I swear.
Yeah, not me though. Like, I'm fine actually. I'm funded by the CIA, as we found out during debates. So I'm actually well funded.
Hungarian?
Sorry?
Aren't you already Hungarian?
Well, yeah. Unfortunately, I am. So.
Well, speaking of the Uline's publication, I just wanted to very sneakily hit my own podcast here. We actually did an interview last episode with one of the co-authors of that Uline's report. So if you want to listen to that, you can find it. The podcast called Ukraine Without Hype. I need the listens.
He needs
I live in Ukraine. My salary ain't great, and our economy's going down the drain. Please like and subscribe.
You want to know what? The hryvnia is still worth more than the ruble, though. So you still got that.
Good.
That's one saving grace.
That's one saving grace.
But all the shit is made in Europe, Dylan. All of this shit is made in Europe, and they take euros.
I went to when I was in the Kiev Oblast, I went to Bucha. And I recorded a lot over there. We went through the local theater, which is completely caved in. I went and I got wine at a local restaurant, which I could see the bullet holes through the wall as I was drinking my wine. I just looked around. The war touched everything there. Everything in Bucha is scarred by the war. The school is completely just unusable at the moment. I went into this one apartment building, and every single apartment was basically burnt out except for one. And I got to interview the one person who was still in the apartment. They had no power, and they had the only apartment that was not touched. And when I say the apartments were burnt out, I mean there was nothing left. Like, you might be able to find one or two bowls in each apartment. And she talked about how she could feel the heat coming through the walls, and how much she wants the Russians out of the country, and how much she wants. And she was talking about like bringing this like Western support to like get air power over, cover the skies. It was of course the call, which it's a sad reality that can't happen, or at least Western leaders won't do it because they're afraid of a direct confrontation with Russia. But the thing that got me is I went to the site where, the famous site, where Zelensky took the photo and where the mass grave is.
Yes.
And I stood there, and they had the thing on the wall. They had this like little monument up describing what it was, and it was just and I don't know what I expected when I went there. I guess like knowing how much it's gotten covered, I like prepared myself for a lot of stuff. I tried to, but it's just like a piece of ground. and I didn't see any bodies or see anything because all of that has been covered. And I don't know what I was expected of it, but the dreadfully mundane nature of the brutality. Like just standing there and like, yeah, there's hundreds of bodies here. And I didn't really know how to react, never really processed it. But what happened there that was super interesting to me was when I was leaving after recording a segment there, a nun walked up to us from the church. Because it's from front of a church. The nun walked up to us, saw the cameras, and just started talking into the cameras. Just started talking, like walking with us, talking. We recorded it for a good 10 minutes. Just immediately when she saw a reporter, she ran out to talk about the Russian soldiers torturing locals, what the Russian soldiers did, what the occupation was like. And when I see people run to tell these stories, at the first time they could just get anyone to listen to these stories about how the Russian soldiers treated them, going to them and saying, so maybe what they did here, we should allow them to do to all of the South. Maybe what they did here, we should allow them to permanently occupy the Donbass. This isn't even a question of should we, can we to them, because they felt what that was like. And that's possibly the reality of throughout the entirety of the South of Ukraine that's occupied right now, and all of the occupied Donbass. And possibly there's a good chance Crimea, when a lot of these people, Tartar activists, get disappeared and they just get found weeks later dead in a river after the Russian government killed them. You talk to these people, they have been permanently scarred by the Russian government. The Russian government wanted to use, this is my opinion, okay, some people think it was rogue units, but I think that there's a possibility the Russian government wanted to intimidate the local population, to make, they saw the military failures, and they translated that frustration into brutalizing the local population, and they wanted to intimidate it. It had the opposite effect. It made it so these are people we can't negotiate with. These people do not respect us as humans. They see us as animals and they treat us like that. Therefore, we cannot allow them to do that to any of our occupied brothers and sisters. And that's the vibe I got from every Ukrainian in Bucha. And it's impossible to look any of those people in the eyes and even ask, do you think they should concede any land to placate? I couldn't even. I've asked people before in interviews, how do you think negotiations could go? Bucha was the one place I couldn't do it. Any local, I almost feel like I would have got smacked in the face for just even suggesting it to a local. After Bucha, after these war crimes were so publicized, the Russians are not negotiating like good actors. They weren't good actors before, but now they're just the people who raped and murdered Ukrainians, and the only solution is get them out.
Yeah, it's quite disappointing how Western readers are reacting to it and have reacted. Basically, what's happening is, even in spite of these atrocities, the Wonder Trio, of course, Shola, Olaf Scholz, of course, our Emmanuel Macron, and of course, to a certain extent, Joe Biden, though he's been doing much better, by the way. Italy, I would not group here. Some people would. Italy has been quietly sending weapons, though Italy is also sort of on the fence. The problem is our country is currently, the free world, so to speak, is run by people who are less sort of wartime leaders and more just your average neoliberal, neocon technocrats, for whom the Russian money was far more lucrative than the Ukrainian, essentially the Ukrainian money, I suppose. A lot of Western politicians and their lobbyists and their right hand men and women under them were on the Russian payroll. This is in the form of being on the board of directors of major Russian companies, and this was like a convenient payout, which they had, and now they just want to. They're desperate to go back to this business as usual. Olaf Scholz, I would say, is the most obvious representation of this. But these people, unfortunately, don't realize that these times are gone. Like, at this point, after a blood and soil conquest, essentially, there's just no fucking way to go back to this world. But they're still trying. To give you an example, by the way, the German attitudes towards Russia and Ukraine before the war. This is a train example, so I'm in my ballpark. In Ukraine, there was a huge problem with the Ukrainian railways. There was lack of investment, lack of money. Everything was falling apart. And right before the war, there was this huge effort to finally get Stadler, the Swiss train manufacturer, to move from Belarus to Ukraine. And it looked like they were about to pick a location for the factory. And finally, after years and years, like not years, but like months and months of sweat and blood, there's this one manufacturer, and of course, this was just the Swiss. The Germans were not touching this whole thing. Meanwhile, in Russia, I think Siemens was involved in like 600 electric multiple units produced for the Moscow suburban rail. They were all over. They're all up in Russian ass for joint project, etc. Before the war, under sanctions, mind you. So this is also post 2014, and this just tells you that Russia is just too lucrative for a bunch of essentially German ghouls who essentially don't give a flying fuck about dead Ukrainians. I mean, are you kidding? The dead Ukrainians don't make number go up. So I think that this is one of the big problems, and this is what the Scholz is being held back by. This is why all these dates of now we're going to send the Iris-T anti-air system, now we're going to send the Marders, they get pushed back and back and back and back and back, and we're blocking every other country that tries to send German hardware. Scholz and people like him are hoping for a Ukrainian defeat because it's just too lucrative to let
Germany is like the no man's sky of foreign policy. They just promised so much and none of it was delivered. It's insane.
Oh, yeah.
No Man's Sky delivered
Eventually,
lot,
they eventually deliver. Eventually, 2 years later. Yeah, maybe 2 years from now. Maybe 2 years from now, the Germans will actually deliver something. But right now, they've delivered nothing. 2
years from now, we'll get the 500 combat helmets they promised, like even prior to the start of the...
Maybe eventually. But the thing that gets me about this is when you get the kind of more moderate, like maybe we should negotiate and give them a little here, give them a little there. You get the moderate version. Then you get the extreme versions of like the Clara Days. What's that? That Irish MP that's goes on the Irish. I don't know if any of you goes on the EU stage and just starts yelling about like you're all bloodthirsty and evil, and the Russians have good. Actually, they're pretty reasonable here, and like maybe we should negotiate. And I remember one line she said. She was like talking about the radical, like evil Eastern Europeans who are dragging us all into this devilish engagement with Russia, as if like Eastern Europe is just like the home of the far right, and the reason why the Eastern Europeans are fighting so hard against Russia here is because they're all far right maniacs. That's how she tried to paint it. But the reality is, I wonder why Eastern Europe in particular understands the position Ukraine's in. Why would Estonia? Why would Lithuania? Why would Latvia? Why would Poland? Why would the Czechs? Why would the Ukrainians? Why would all of these people, particularly in comparison to, say, the Germans or the French, understand the position Ukraine is in, be the most sympathetic, and know the reality? Is because they've experienced it firsthand. They've experienced Russian tanks mowing down their protesters. They've experienced the banning of their language, which happened in Ukraine, by the way. A lot of Ukrainian lecturers had to flee to the reason why Ukraine, by the way, is so popular in the west of the country is because that was a lot of those are in the parts of that used to be controlled by other countries that didn't ban Ukrainian, while the Russian government banned Ukrainian historically and persecuted people for printing Ukrainian literature. It's because they understand that reality of what the Russian Empire has done historically, and they understand that, like, right now we see the Russian government trying to look at revoking the recognition of, what was it, Lithuania sovereignty? They understand that Ukraine might be first, but who's next? And hey, we understand the position you're in. We're going to help you. These people aren't good faith actors. These people are an empire. And that's why I want to get into our next topic, which is Vladimir Putin's recent statements about being Peter the Great. Have you guys seen this? Do you guys know what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, but Dylan, have you considered that US bad?
Fuck!
I know, right? God damn.
You damn debate bros. Every single time. God, the U.S. do be bad, though. U.S. School shooting, fat, Vietnam.
War-centric.
You know that the U.S. government is racist, Dylan? Did you know that means no one else can be racist?
Well, hey. Look, you white Ukrainian, okay? You need to stop talking to us Americans, okay? Okay. Well, damn. I thought all Ukrainians were white. I thought that's what I've been told. I thought all the Ukrainians were white.
Most of them. Kinda. There's some. I guess many people moved in from.
I've
from
never,
Afghanistan.
I never,
Not many,
anybody,
but
nobody
some.
can prove to me there's not non-white Ukrainians. Doesn't exist. Impossible.
Yeah, I mean, except
Depending.
for literally the guy sitting in front of you. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, no.
Otherwise, then all the people that I've been introduced to here that were not white, except for those people, they're all white. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic, which is his comments
Before I
about Peter
get
the
into a
Great.
digression of the historic multi-ethnicity of people who call themselves Ukrainians now. Yeah, let's move on.
Let's move on, which is the comments about Peter the Great. So I'm gonna play this quick at home. You guys have seen it, right? You've seen his comments about being Peter the Great and the conquest of old land. I'm just going to show this on screen quickly. We could play the audio, but I mean he's speaking Russian, so all of my English speaking fans, most of them won't understand it. So I'm just gonna read the statement that's the most significant part. During the war, this is a statement from Vladdy Boy. During the war with Sweden, Peter the Great didn't conquer anything. He took back what had always belonged to us, even though all of Europe recognized it as Sweden's. It seems now it's our turn to get our lands back. And he says this while smiling. Afterwards, a lot of Russian state media, I do want to say this, has reacted to this with glee, basically like saying like, oh, finally, we got our narrative, etc., etc., etc. So I wanted to ask you guys, what do you guys think of the statement from Vladimir Putin, comparing himself to Peter the Great and saying now it's a time to reconquer these old lands. It's time to take back Russian territory from the Ukrainians, basically.
Well, I don't know about that, Dylan, but like, have you considered that like U.S. bad and like U.S. bad?
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, I know, right?
But like, what the thing that gets me about this is the argument up to this point. Yeah, this is extremely mask off. The argument up to this point has always been NATO expansion, Western imperialism, etc. They would even try to say this Ukraine. Some commentators in Russia, some state media commentators, the Ukraineness of, I think this was actually Medvedev who said this, the Ukraineness of Ukraine is actually a delusion implanted by the West. This is just completely dropping that narrative and saying, look, this is our land. We're going to take it. It's ours. This is the Mountain Turks arc. This is that these aren't Kurds. These are Mountain Turks. This is our land. This is Russian land. We're taking back what's ours. I'm Peter the Great. I'm a historical conqueror. I'm writing my name into history. We're going to take what's ours. If this was about NATO expansion, then this would just be about, well, this has nothing to do with taking back Russian historical territory. No, he's completely saying, no, this is ours. We're just going to take this. This is ours. This is what he's saying. It's not about NATO expansion.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it's essentially Putin's. We have always been at war with Eurasia kind of moment, which eventually comes with like fascist empires.
Point out though, this is a mask off moment only for the West, because as a Ukrainian, the Russians have literally been saying this forever. He is not saying anything new. These are literally things that they have believed and have said since the fall of the Soviet Union, since before the Soviet Union, since during the Soviet Union. This is simply the essence of Russian statehood in a way. And one of the most annoying things when I was getting started as a Ukrainian journalist was just the fact that the West does not talk to us. It does not. It does now. Like, that is changing, and that's great. That's fantastic. But prior to this, just people didn't care what we had to say about Russia. They just dismissed it as like the paranoid ravings of neo-Nazi nationalists or whatever the fuck. But the thing is, Russia has been saying this for as long as there has been a Russia. They have never fundamentally believed in the existence of Ukraine. To them, it is, we are legitimately a part of Russia. We are a core part of Russia, just like Belarus. Kiev is as they love saying all the time, the mother of Russian cities, because Kiev is where the Kievan Rus, the kind of polity that spawned this whole part of Eastern Europe, originated. So this is nothing new for Ukrainians. And like hearing Westerners go, "Oh, it's a mass con." No, the Russians have been like this the whole time. They were like this in 2014. They were like this in 2000. They were like this in 1990. They were like this in 1950. They were like this in 1850. That is who they are. That is one of the core reasons why Ukrainians are so opposed to Russian rule over Ukraine, because we know what they want. That is the extermination of any sense of Ukraine and the imposition of Russian identity, and that's what they had achieved for centuries. For centuries, this is what they did. The Russian Empire would, like you said, ban Ukrainian, force everyone to be Russian. The Soviet Union perfected it by making Russian seem not like the Russians were doing this. No, it's the language of Lenin. It's the language of the world proletariat. That's why everyone speaks Russian, because the global proletariat needs to speak a common language, and what better language to take than the language spoken by our great father Lenin? But in practice, what that turned into was we were Russified. People used the Russian language, people wrote in Russian, people thought in Russian, everything was Russian. And to the Russians, that is the normal and preferable state of affairs that they have tried to impose forever. And again, in their eyes, they were successful. Again, Putin, there was an interview Putin gave in, I believe, 1993. This is when he was still a excuse me. This was when he was still an advisor to the St. Petersburg mayoral office, where the interviewer, and I can dig up the video, though it is in Russian. I can dig up the video where the interviewer asked him, like, "Oh, what do you think of Ukraine?" And he said, "Well, I think it's awful that we're all divided. This is a like false division of the great Russian nation. The West is just trying to divide Russia." Like all the shit that he is saying now, he was saying in 1993, and he was not alone. And
the difference now is that
sorry,
the difference now, I would say, is that now there's an invasion, and then Putin said it personally in a forum that like
personally in 1993. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, but at that point there was no invasion, and there was more deniability. Now there's less.
Remember that all of this started after Yanukovych was run out of office, and Yanukovych was entirely pro-Russian, entirely happy to act like a Lukashenko for Ukraine. I mean, that's one of the big reasons we ran him out, because unlike Belarus, we were not going to deal with a Russian dictator.
Speaking about that, Lukashenko is a great another example. Russia has been trying to absorb Belarus for a very long time. At least that's been a goal of Vladimir Putin personally for a very long time. And that's why Lukashenko, he's not as skilled as as Tito. He's not as skilled as the man. But he played this kind of for a while with the West, this kind of Tito-ish role of any time Putin would get a little too, annexy, he would move over to the West and be like, hey, maybe, this Russia thing is a little yikesy. And then when the West would be like, okay, we want you to make some changes, he'd be like, okay, back over here. I've always loved, actually, I wanted to be the leader of Russia at one point, when you think about it. And he'd do this back and forth, because he was trying to leverage his control so he could still be the leader of Belarus going forward. It's been relatively successful up until recently, when he's become more isolated after the recent crackdown, and with this invasion, it's only going to get more isolated. But the goal of the Russian government has been, at least Vladimir Putin for sure, has been the eventual absorbing of Belarus, because he believes it is an artificial division, and he believes the same thing about Ukraine. And this is what also Russian leaders historically have believed. That's why they banned the Russian language, and a lot of the the Ukrainian language. They didn't ban Russian. The Ukrainian language, that's why they fled to Austro-Hungary to learn and teach the Ukrainian language and to write Ukrainian literature. It was because it was banned in Russian-occupied territory, because they don't view Ukraineness, being Ukraine, as really legitimate. A lot of people will talk about it as a Western delusion or a artificial division. And that has been the Russian governmental position for a very long time. It's just the difference is they went into this conflict with a different geopolitical situation. So they're able to add the cloak of, this is due to NATO expansion. This isn't actually due to any of this history that dates way before the creation of NATO. This has to do with NATO, and it completely erases what Russia's historically abusive relationship has been with Ukraine.
Sure, but
That's
this
what
is actually a
saying all
continuation of the
everybody what they
historical
say.
Russian like. So this is a continuation of the historical Russian imperial prerogative, though. Like from day one, this has been like continuous expansion in all directions at all costs. Well, mostly at all costs, and the expansion only stops as long as the country's bureaucracy catches up with the expansion, and all these other peoples that we assimilate need to be sort of well, essentially melted into this like common Russian
Like Barbie.
epoch, which has been the case with, of course, which has been the case with essentially every ethnicity inside Russia, right? So in Buryatia, there's not such like a big sort of Buryat speaking minority. Like there might be minorities there, but it's Russian there. So Russians didn't make the mistake of allowing minority languages to flourish. It's all in spite of Russia's efforts if it's happening anywhere. And then there was the same thing with Ukraine. They tried the same thing during the Soviet Union with Ukrainians. After the terror famine of the Holodomor, they settled in a whole bunch of Russians. They tried to Russify Ukraine at all costs. Actually, one thing they did was, and it's just like when I was reading about the Kiev metro, it stuck with me that at some point they, 70s maybe, they switched the Kiev metro announcements to Russian just because, as part of this sort of global or like Soviet Russification efforts. And
Speaking of Russification, I'm showing on screen right now Mariupol occupied currently by the Russians. It used to actually have Ukrainian colors on the entrance sign for Mariupol, and they've painted it the Russian colors. Not only that, but they've moved in Russian textbooks. They're giving a very different view to Ukrainian youth about exactly the Ukrainian youth that are still in the city and trying to get an education throughout this conflict. I don't know how it's even possible given the conditions, but they're bringing in textbooks to give them a different view. They're renaming certain squares. They're raising the Russian flag instead of the Ukrainian flag. What they're trying to do is just a modern Russification, and I would even say cultural ethnic cleansing of the area, trying to remove this Ukrainian history and whitewash it and just replace it with this I guess you could almost say just it's the modern version of the Russian state banning the Ukrainian language. The only difference is it's slightly more milquetoast and they're just trying to Russify everything. But I will also say on top of that, it's not just that they're doing that. They're just like removing these signs of Ukrainianness in the area. But again, the people who oppose them in this area of doing that, they all speak Russian. And so this idea that, well, the difference is this is Russian-speaking territory. The Russian-speaking territory, right, they want to be part of Ukraine. They want to still practice Ukrainian culture, the culture of the Cossacks, all this stuff. And they are the ones that are fighting the most brutally against this. And so if somebody was to tell you, well, look at the percentage of Russian speaking over here, look at this percentage of Russian speaking over here, this is totally appropriate. It isn't, because this is the population that's fighting against this cultural erasure. Just because the majority of Irish people don't speak Irish on a daily basis, they speak English, does not mean that the Irish identity doesn't exist. Just because I
Mexico has the right to annex all of California in that case.
Exactly. Or I speak English on a daily basis, but I'm American. I would never identify myself with the crown. I would never do that. We're actually pretty anti-monarchy over here.
Guys, have you considered that US bad?
Every time you foil me.
Fuck.
Every time you foil me. Right? You were trying to say something earlier. I interrupted you. Would you like to jump back in?
Oh no, I think I said my piece actually.
I was speaking to my other colleague.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, actually, no. There was one thing I think maybe this will help, especially an American audience, understand this better than just U.S. bad. Which, yes, U.S. bad. Great job. You have reached the geopolitical understanding of a 6-year-old.
Very good. Yeah. Very proud of them all at home.
Yes, really. But so. A lot of white nationalism in the U.S. is very virulently anti-black, and that includes anti-black culture. To them, the black culture is illegitimate. The black lived experience is not real. The softer white nationalists, who are not like straight up, let's have a white ethno-state, but like everyone should just accept that whites are better. They're even fine with, and you'll hear this from like moderate Republicans, they're fine with black people as long as they just do everything white, that they adopt white culture in its entirety, that they have no signs, that they stop talking about race, they stop, singing so loud or talking loud, and stop wearing afros and stop having weird names. And if they just act white, everything would be fine, right? This is the moderate version of white nationalism, which is accepted by basically the entire Republican Party. Uh, that is a pretty parallel situation to how Russians view Ukrainians. If we would just shut up about all this Ukraine stuff and just realize that actually we're Russians and it's better to speak Russian and just write in Russian and think in Russian, have everything in Russian, everything would be fine and dandy, and there wouldn't be any war or conflict, and we'd be brotherly nations.
Just be
So-
submissive and breedable, or in this case, settleable.
Oh, come on. Adam, everyone deserves to feel submissive and breedable.
Amen.
Oh,
But
hell yeah.
I want to say quickly, I don't want to blame like Western people at all for like not getting the message more clearly, because this was designed by the Russian government to be this way. You got to look at domestic media versus international media. What they say internationally and domestically was about the NATO stuff, right? But domestically, what they've said about Ukraine has been consistent since before the fall of the Russian Empire all to today. It has been this kind of consistent narrative, even if some policies like the banning of the Ukrainian language have lessened and there was progress. But of course, there would be one step forward, two steps back. So you can't really blame people for not knowing, because the Russian government doesn't really want you to know. A good other example of this was like when Israel, for example, when they had their recent conflict, to even call it that is, I think, putting it in a very milquetoast kind of rose-filled glasses, with the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians. They would tell international audiences different things about what's going on within the Gaza Strip than they would tell their domestic audiences. Sometimes for strategic reasons, to try to see if they could get Hamas to go into tunnels in preparation for a full invasion to then strike them. And a lot of Western commentators got fooled about this idea like, oh my gosh, Israel's just launched a full invasion of the Gaza Strip. This was designed specifically to try to make the Palestinian Hamas react in a certain way strategically. And so this isn't the first time like a geopolitical power will have a certain domestic message and a different international message. The Germans have did this during the Olympics, for example, where domestically they would say a certain thing about the Jews, but when international people come to look at the Olympics, oh no, look, they're perfectly being treated fine. We're removing all these racist signs, and then they leave and then they go back to their everyday anti-Semitism, right? This has happened in South Africa when it comes to what they would do domestically and what they would say about what they're doing internationally. This has happened in China. This has happened in the United States when it comes to Native Americans. This is part and parcel of discrimination, racism, bigotry, and forced assimilation. This is how the media of empires work. They try to paint a certain rosy picture internationally and give different reasons for what's happening, and then domestically they prepare their populations for what's to come, which was what happened in Bucha.
If you want
Great
an
try.
example of
Go
what
ahead.
the Russians were saying domestically, there was a piece that was written in one of Russia's biggest papers right at the start of the invasion. It was published in RIA Novosti that I translated for the New Voice. And this is a domestic aimed piece. It's written in Russian in a Russian paper. It's meant for Russians to read. And it is one of the clearest examples of 21st century fascist ideology that you could find. If you're curious, look for RIA Novosti Manifesto NV, and you will find it on Google.
I've read that. Yeah. Oh, that's
add a link
pretty
to
pretty
the
unsettling.
translation as
Yeah,
well.
it's pretty fucking unsettling. I read it actually. There was a thing that came out. Wait, was that the thing that came out in the early days of war, or like on the second day? And it was just like this blood and soil. Yeah, we're taking back what's
Exactly.
ours. Yeah, that. One other fun tidbit that I've read, that if you check out sort of the state-sponsored Russian pulp fiction market of like what's being thought there, of like one popular genre in Russia is this sort of time traveling of like some Soviet patriot time travels back and reinvents Soviet machinery and guns, and then doesn't defeat the Nazis, but it defeats America, the UK, or France sometimes, and it's never the Nazis. Funny enough, in fact, there are plenty of novels where Soviets actually ally with the Nazis, as they almost did, by the way, during Soviet Axis talks, until like Stalin was too greedy, then did Bulgaria, and then the Germans pulled out of the discussions. But Soviet almost became the fourth Axis power. And their pulp fiction reflects this to this day. There's my favorite has to be Tovarish Hitler, which is a two-part series,
Fred Hitler.
which is yeah, a Soviet patriot goes back in time and like is like somehow reborn in the body of Hitler or something, and then he allies with the Soviets and then beats the Allies. So it's not like these books aren't about like, oh yeah, dude, I'm gonna go back. I'm in Hitler's body. I'm gonna stop the Nazis. Oh no, I'm gonna lead the Nazis alongside the Soviets against the Allies because fuck you, you know. So it's all about it's like
I'm not gonna do the Holocaust. Oh no, I'm gonna Holocaust harder.
Oh no, it's gonna be the people's. It's gonna be the people's Holocaust, comrade.
The thing is, here's a great thing for everybody to do at home. Go watch Russian foreign ministry statements. Go look at what the Russians say at the UN, the Russian government. Go look at the statements met for Western media, Western outlets. Then go and compare that with Russian officials on Telegram. Then go and compare that with Russian state media domestically. Just do the translate or any of that, or just look at like even local politicians in Russia and what they're saying, and you'll see a stark difference because it's a messaging. There's a different there's interest at play where they know that if they just say internationally like Ukraine fake, artificial, nonsense, it's not going to play because this is people have heard that song and dance before. Many African nations, as we saw at the UN when they were jumping to oppose the Russian invasion, they're like, this reminds us of what we had to deal with. This is the song and dance you're doing right here now is something we've heard before. And you saw them
European colonialism. We know a couple things about that.
You know, this I feel like this is a familiar tune to me. And
it's all blood and soil.
That's
basically
the thing. So just go to the Russians directly. You don't need to listen to us to tell you that these government officials have the goal of erasing Ukraine because they believe Ukraine is artificial and they are the heirs to the Russian Empire's historic racism and discrimination against Ukraine. Just go listen to them themselves. You don't need to take our word for it. Just go listen to the Russians right out of the horse's mouth.
Mm. Dylan, but like US bad.
Once again, you foiled me.
Not again. God damn it. Back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board. We need to start from square one again.
I'm sorry, fellow Nazis, I guess.
Yes. Dude, oh my gosh. Can I wait? I passed the rights.
Judeo-Zionist Bolshevik Nazi, apparently.
Can I talk about something? No, when we talk about the far right in Ukraine, can I just say recently, I passed the right sector offices in Lviv. You've seen it before, right? The right sector office in Lviv, they blare music like a madman. They've got the big stickers on their cars and vehicles. They got the people outside looking all tough, like guarding the place. Can I just say, it is the gayest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, can I just say? They and I don't know what I even mean by that, but the way they carry themselves with their matching outfits and like their like group tattoos and like just the way they carry themselves, and I don't mean that in like a mean way. Do you get what I'm trying to say? The way they like the
machismo is very campy.
It is very campy.
Every organization that is way into machismo all across the world, it's just super camp. It's like you got all these good-looking, muscular guys, and like I'm bi, so I'm like looking at these like good-looking, muscular dudes. You're like nice. I mean, and then they're all synchronized. They're all wearing tight clothing, and you're like, come on, guys, come on. What are you hiding? What are you scared of?
I don't like right sector. Their politics are absolutely dreadful. Right?
Oh no, yeah,
they're disgusting. They're awful. The reason they're involved in this conflict is because all of Ukraine is fighting, and sadly, the right sector is a part of Ukraine. They've been reduced in their popularity. Their popularity has plummeted to. I don't think they hold a single.
They lost their main funder.
Yeah, that is true. They lost their main funder. Could you bring up who that was, by the way?
Yes, a personal enemy of mine, actually, that I've written quite a few articles about. This is a man named Arsen Avakov, who used to be Ukraine's post-Maidan interior minister. For the Americans in the audience, the interior ministry is like the like department that oversees the police on a national level. They oversee basically all law enforcement and internal security on a national level. So think of them as like DHS mixed with the FBI. Basically, they're like Homeland Security plus the FBI mixed together. And he obviously, as you can imagine, that's quite a powerful part of the government. And he was seen to be basically untouchable for most of his time in government. He actually outlived the person who appointed him, Petro Poroshenko, who was the first post-Maidan president. Poroshenko lost to Zelensky, and Zelensky even kept him on for I think like 2 years after, or a year after he got elected. Even though typically when you form a new government, you get rid of all the old people. That's usually how it works, right?
Is this due to the influence he held, or Zelensky liked him as a
no? Oh no! No one likes
him,
Arsene Avakov. That dude is pretty universally hated. No, because he was that influential in politics. And one of the reasons he was that influential in politics was his seemingly magical ability to call up a protest basically anywhere he wanted in the country. So again, Minister of the Interior controls the police. But Avakov, very cleverly, I guess, also paid off basically every single far-right organization in Ukraine. And whenever he wanted to put pressure on the government, for example, like they were going to fire him, or let's say investigate his son-in-law for selling defective goods to the Ukrainian military in the middle of a war, he would spin up a bunch of far-right protests who would march under the president's office, give a lot of awful pictures for the Western press to see all the Ukrainian Nazis, and the police would stand by and do nothing. When he lost, when he was finally forced out, which is a story we still haven't heard. I would love to one day hear the details of how he was actually forced out of office. When he was forced out, every single far-right group in the country overnight became politically irrelevant. They never had parliamentary power, but now they don't even have street protest power. They do not have the money. No one's paying them to go on protest, so they don't. And you haven't had a torch-bearing march through the middle of Kiev since then, because again, no one's paying them to do so.
Wait, I thought Ukraine was run by Nazis, though. How is this possible?
That's the thing.
It's almost like
they've lost so much.
Like that's a Russian lie.
The thing is, they've lost so much power and influence. When people bring up, and I've even heard Kyle Kalinske bring this up, this idea that one day they're going to, like the Mujahideen, overthrow the government. They are at the weakest point historically, the Ukrainian far right, that I think I've ever seen them. And disagree with me if you can.
Yanukovych, they were stronger than this.
Yeah, and the thing is, the denazification argument for the invasion is already nonsensical. But this is the dumbest point to invade under those pretenses, because the fascists of Ukraine are the weakest they have ever been under Zelensky, a Jewish government, right? Somebody whose family barely survived the Holocaust, who lost a lot of his family in the Holocaust. And the far right asked their opinion about Zelensky. They don't like the guy for a few reasons. Number one, Jewish. Number two, he's not in their power block completely. Like he's not with the right sector. He's not a friend of the right sector. And so when I looked at these people, I missed their office the first few times I passed it. I just missed it. I just completely walked past it. They're a shell of their former selves. I think I saw one person with a right sector tattoo actually that's involved in combat. I saw one person. That's it. And I'm in the areas that a lot of times the right sector used to be like, this is the most dominant area for the right sector. They are a complete shell of the former self. The idea that the right sector is ever going to regain the power it had, and even then it wasn't like taking over the country, is laughable. These people are not going to overthrow the government. They're not this huge influential stock in Ukrainian society anymore. They're slowly fading away, and it just looked like just a noisy far right bar. Their office looked like. In fact, actually, I think that's what it is now.
Yeah, pretty much. Like if you have ever seen a biker bar in any city, that's basically what the far right's been.
This would be like
reduced.
This would like be me saying, look, we need to invade America because the Hells Angels are going to take over the government. Now the Hells Angels are going to take over the government? If this is the 1960s, it would still have been laughable to say such a thing. But
at least
now,
it would have been like a
Yeah,
little
it-
bit more, like believable, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but and all these Hell's Angel comments are being made by like half-informed European streamers who don't know the world beyond like the borders of the EU or something. Which is
No,
actually
they're
one of my
actually-
disappointments I had with like American streamers, like especially like Kyle Kalinske is in this category. Hassan, Abi, absolutely. I mean, they just don't know a lot, but they are extremely confident about their worldview. Even though like they know desperately little about Europe, and problem is. For them, it is really like, which I mean, I have to go on about this because it triggers the fuck out of me. They have this sort of American sort of imperial syndrome, right? So they live on planet America, and everything in the world has to be like in America, and it has to be like they imagine the world because they're American and they're in America. Therefore, you know, and yeah. And
Now,
this
let me tell
this-
you about your country.
Yeah, let me tell you something. Yeah, like, but and so this really annoys me because like Europe is a complex place. It's lots of people we have been genociding each other for like since ever, basically. And when there's something happens, when there's some kind of war, it's going to be something like the Syrian conflict when it's like 86 different groups with and each of them being friends with one half and enemies with the other, which and it's completely random which who's friends with who and who's enemies with who. And so then these people come in and they have their little talking points prepared. They're like they're leftist, internationalist, whatever, which always happens to be the pro-Russian position. And then they try to sort of analyze the situation, which like their audience is like, I guess, some of them, some portion of it, because they're just unaware, just like them, because their audience are Americans mostly. But then when an actual European comments on it, or like when listens to it, like just from my perspective, it's, I mean, that's where I get a stroke, basically. So they're just like,
I remember one of the first time I met Kraut, he called me a communist and then left the Discord chat that I was part of. The second time I met Kraut, I think he just didn't know who I was, and he just had a reaction like that. The second time I met Kraut, I remember one of the big things he was talking about was like, basically like look, there's enough Americans, okay? There's enough Americans. I want to just promote European streamers. I want to promote European content creators. I want more Europeans. And at first I was like, this European scumbag, we come over there and liberate Europe once again. And I was like, what did we do? But the more I listened to this conflict, I realized we really, as Americans, we don't listen to the people that much involved in the conflict, about the conflict. The people,
Why
the main,
should you?
if you
You're
listen,
American.
the main people that I think Americans are getting like foreign policy advice from right now are people like Tucker Carlson, people like Rachel Maddow, people like people with no connections to these countries. And I want them to bring on more Ukrainian guests, more European guests. But I'm realizing that even though we have more interconnectedness than ever, when it comes to like media consumption and how easy it is to access foreign medias, I think a lot of our mistakes when it comes to how we perceive this conflict is not listening to the people who are directly involved in it screaming the stuff at us, because it's not like it's just now we're realizing, oh wow,
During this podcast.
yeah, a few times. But again, we're Americans, we're loud, and that's our privilege and right.
Patty Bookers are listening. I grew up in New York. That's why I have this accent. So if you want a Ukrainian who grew up in New York who can bridge those demos, give me a call.
We talked about it.
Doing New York back in the Donetsk, like around Donetsk, there's a village called New York.
Yes,
Was it
I'm
that?
aware. I find that
because
very amusing.
I find it suspicious because it didn't say like New York, and that's how like Americans in the East
New
Coast
York?
talk usually.
No,
New
no,
York.
No.
No?
See, I'm from New York. That's how you
Oh,
say
okay.
it.
Okay, got it.
The thing is, it's not like this is like the new stuff we just talked about, like Putin going mask off. Ukrainians have been talking about this for so long. And this is why I want to bring more guests on the show, like the one we have on today, is because I feel like in the future, if we just bring in the commentators who can give us more of a historical perspective, give us more of what the people on the ground are actually talking about, then you can try to alleviate a lot of times these American-centric positions of just viewing it as, oh, they're the Russian-speaking population, so I'm sure they want to be part of Russia, even though, again, it's the Russian-speaking populations fighting the hardest against the Russians, which is, I guess, a big part of the reason I started this podcast while I'm in Ukraine, is because I want to find and meet people in person, like our guest today, bring them on the show, so people can actually listen to people on the ground who are facing this conflict.
And that's why I'm here as well, to give you the European perspective on things and complain about dumb Americans.
Shut up, Euro, and give us guns.
Eurocucks everywhere. Okay.
Eurocucks, send us guns.
Look, okay.
I want to know the Ukrainian perspective on Europe. I apologize, Adam. It's nothing against you personally.
Oh, of course.
Look, all
sucks, and you need to send us more guns.
Okay, but one thing, we should condition aid to Ukraine based upon them having larger serving sizes moving forward, because I'm sick of ordering a plate of wings and they bring me 5. If I pay, like, I don't know the amount, well, actually everything's cheap here, but if I pay any money at all for a plate of wings, I don't expect 5 wings, okay? I expect 10 to 15 wings, okay? I expect something to feed a man, not a small, tiny baby, okay? Please fix your serving sizes.
For the Georgian restaurants.
I just went to some. They're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful.
That's where you get the real like the Chinese like portion size. You know, you go to a Chinese place, like order like I don't know, stir fry beef or whatever. You get like a fucking like 3 plates full of something for like $20.
I'll never understand.
In Ukraine, that's where you get that kind of service.
How they get so much food into those tiny takeout boxes, and then you open them, and it's just like a mountain of food on your plate. You can never finish. It's beautiful. I love it.
It's the same everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Well, Dylan, Europe is making you become healthy. You're here to lose weight. That's your the true goals of your business.
That is true. I'm trading being slightly overweight for being slightly more PTSD'd. So I think it's a good trade-off.
Oh, hey, good. I mean, if the PTSD causes you to lose all appetite, then hell yeah, you fixed your health problems.
Absolutely.
Just don't kill yourself in the meantime. That's all you need to pay attention to.
Okay, almost a 1-year anniversary. So I've made it a year. Hey, I gotta say, if there's anything that's helped me like confront whether, because a year ago I had the attempt, confront whether I want to die or not, it's being in a van going back to trying to move from the front line and getting spotted by Russian drones, those little mechanical devils. Having that moment where I know I'm getting watched by a Russian drone, that made me know I don't want to die, because I really did not want to die in that moment.
So, and also making a podcast.
Actually, now that I remember that I'm a podcaster for a living, maybe I should go back in the van. Okay, so do you guys want to wrap up?
So once again, you can read my paper. It's english.nv.eua. It's really simple. English.nv.ua. You can also listen, and please do listen to Ukraine Without Hype. That is my podcast. It's about Ukraine, by Ukrainians, in English. Find it on all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you really want to hear entirely way too online takes from me, you can follow me at Romeo Kokriatski on Twitter.
Absolutely.
And if you don't know how to spell that, Dylan can probably include a link to that in the description.
I will 100% include a link. Thank you guys for once again producing an amazing Ukraine report.
Hell yeah.
I do want to once again say that I took photographic evidence that Sprite is the soda of the Ukrainian military. It was in the van. I was concentrating on it while the drone was overhead, so I remember it vividly. Therefore, Pepsi fans, which I'm a part of, we have to cope and seethe, as well as Coke fans. A sad reality. And you know, it's again more evidence. Wait, I need to say one last thing. I need to speak over Ukrainian voices one more time. It's also further evidence that it's not a Nazi country, because if it was, it would have been Fanta. Now you can. Okay, sorry.
Oh God, that's true.
That's true, yeah.
Thanks.
But yes, Adam, Dylan, thank you very much for having me on. And yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks for trying to have more Ukrainian voices on. That's really appreciated.